Welcome, everybody, to the Straight Shooter Wrestling Podcast. I'm one half of your host, Santi, here with Steve. How you doing, Steve?
Not bad, buddy. How you been?
I've been pretty good. How is your week going when it comes to the world of professional wrestling? You enjoying what we're seeing on TV these days?
Honestly, I was really disappointed by Monday Night Raw.
Hmm.
I thought it was probably one of the not as well done ones, but we didn't have Hunter. We didn't have Triple H running the show. Unfortunately, he's out with COVID. So I do think the producer of that show was actually Road Dogg. So they tried some different things. I never thought I would see Mustafa Ali ending Monday Night Raw. So that was interesting. But what about you, man? Like WWE's getting shook up right now. It's weird. It seems like a lot's going on.
A lot's been going on. What I will say, look, I'm going to say this, and I'm just in the minority of it, and it's just because I'm an impatient little WWE stan. I actually didn't love the Bray Wyatt promo that everyone is loving. This is going to be the most selfish thing I ever say as a wrestling fan. I didn't want to hear about the real man, Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda. I just wanted spooky wookiness. That's what I wanted, the spooky stuff. I wanted Brambling Rabbit. I wanted it all. I wanted them to come at me with full force with the spookiness. I know that this is a long-term story. I understand that I'm being impatient, but I just wanted nothing but spookiness in this. It's all I wanted. I didn't want a full promo from Bray Wyatt. I just wanted spookiness.
So you don't think that was a work?
I do think it's a work. I do think that it's, and that's the thing. That's the reason why I'm acknowledging that I'm being this impatient wrestling fan, right?
Yeah.
Part of me is like, the smart fan, I guess, is like, okay, this is a work. He's setting us up. A la like when Chris Jericho came back smiling, right? And he wouldn't say anything, right? I do think it's a work, but I still just wanted the spooky stuff because of how it came out at Extreme Rules. I had all this anticipation to see the Firefly Funhouse come to life. And I think I've told you numerous times, the Firefly Funhouse is like one of my favorite things ever in wrestling. So I was really excited to see it come to life, and for me to have to wait a bit longer for it, I just know I'm being impatient.
Oh, you're so impatient because I was so on the other end of the spectrum.
Most people were.
I read through it all. Granted, it was nice to see a different character. It was nice to see Wyndham for once on SmackDown, but you knew it was a work the second it was almost like, and I hate to say it, and I'm not saying that the Roman Reigns coming out as Joe announcing his leukemia thing, but it was very similar. Like when you saw him in just regular street gear, you knew this was going to be very different. But again, it was very nice to see a different version of Bray once again, and it gave us enough of the story that we were able to understand that this is going to be a very long and drawn out process. And I think if we got everything right away, it would lose its luster really quick. So I loved every second of it.
Give me the spookies. So you're saying that this was less Roman Reigns coming out as Joe to talk about his real life struggles, and more the long-term version of Mark Henry coming out and swerving everybody with that pretend retirement. So you're saying it's more along the lines of that. Yeah. Dude, I wanted to see Rambling Rabbit on the mic. All right. I was just that guy. I just wanted to see Rambling Rabbit cut a fire ass promo. That's all I wanted. But listen, I know I'm being a shitty wrestling fan right now. I'm aware.
Listen, man, we're not like, we're going to have to redo this Wyatt 6 video that we did. Granted, thank you guys all for the comments and viewing that video because it did extremely well for us. But I think you and I are going to have to really revisit that in about 2.5 weeks when we finally get some more context, because I think there's a long little profile for us to really keep up with that. So I think we need to go a different direction with that. But honestly, I'm excited for everything that's happening with this Bray Wyatt situation. But I digress. Let's get into what we're talking about today.
For sure. And the topic of the show, funnily enough, came because of a change of schedule that we have. For those that are behind the curtain and don't really know what's going on with the recordings, the back end of Straight Shoot, we record usually on Wednesdays. And we do Wednesdays because it's the day of the week that works for both of us. Dynamite is on Wednesdays. Monday Night Raw has already happened, etc., etc. And if there's a premium live event, it gives us a couple of days to digest. We moved it to Tuesdays for life scheduling that just made it easier for us to be able to record on Tuesdays. Just so happens that as of the recording of this, we have NXT and AEW Dynamite happening on at the same time. For background context, AEW typically happens on Wednesday nights. NXT typically happens on Tuesday nights. NXT has been bumped out of their Wednesday time slot for hockey. Just shows how much they're valued over there in the TBS network. I'm just saying hockey doesn't get viewed a lot. So if they anticipate hockey is getting more views than AEW, that's a problem. So AEW got bumped down to a Tuesday night slot, going head to head with NXT. So that got us thinking, is WWE finally acknowledging the existence of AEW as proper competition? We know Vince McMahon has flat out said they're not competition. It's just blood and guts. And then they made their pay-per-view called Blood and Guts, blah, 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 blah. Vince McMahon, in his twisted little world, never acknowledged AEW as competition publicly, per se. And none of the investor calls, no interviews, nothing like that. Technically, neither has Triple H. However, tonight, on this night that NXT is going head to head with AEW Dynamite, Triple H has brought some big guns to go head to head with AEW. Yeah. Steve, do you want to list off some of the people that appeared on this episode of NXT? Because this is our topic of the show. Has WWE finally acknowledged AEW as true, proper rival competition in the space of professional wrestling?
Yeah, Santi, I was very surprised. Like, you know how active you and I are on social media, and when we saw like kind of the list on Instagram of what they were going to show and provide on NXT, I was just like, whoa, this is next level. So obviously we knew last week we were going to get Raquel Gonzalez, or is it Raquel Rodriguez, one of the two, Rhea Ripley, and we were getting Sonya Deville, all from the main roster to come down to help with the feuds that are going on in the women's division. Mandy Rose being away because of the passing of her brother. Somebody had to come fill in her shoes with Toxic Attraction. Sonya Deville did a great job of that. But here's where it gets interesting, Santi. We had the likes of the Good Brothers, the OC, Gallows and Anderson, who have just returned to Monday Night Raw, brought down to have a trios tag match. We had Kevin Owens showing up for a segment. We had the likes of Shinsuke Nakamura coming back as the King of Strong Style. He came out in his black and gold like he was back in NXT for a full run. Santi, I think I'm missing a couple of people, but like, we had big names from NXT Black and Gold, NXT 2.0, and this new era of NXT, all on tonight's card, and that's just saying, we're going straight up against you, we're going to win like we always do. And I think NXT, from what I saw of the show, was a very good show. It was fantastic. What do you, like, what is Triple H's and Shawn Michaels' mindset here? These are not small names.
No, not at all. And again, for those that might be listening after the fact, tonight's AEW Dynamite big name headliner match was Jon Moxley versus Adam Page. So like a big marquee match that sells seats for the AEW faithful 100%. You see that match on the card, you're going to attend the show, you're going to want to watch. But are you going to want to watch when NXT is trying to put on a show like this? So this is a really interesting dynamic that we're in, because Triple H is in charge, and the last time that he was in charge of NXT, when he had his role as head creative in NXT, he got his ass kicked by AEW. That's part of the reason why he was fired. Really, nothing officially, like in terms of like, you're fired, but all of the staff that he's hired was let go while he was recovering from the cardiac event. NXT got completely rebranded while he was away. people, the roster was completely stripped down to its bones, to where it was college athletes, models, etc. That vision that Triple H and Khan had, that Vince McMahon and Khan had. If anyone knows what I'm about to reference, it is like when Triple H coming back is like when Childish Gambino's character comes back in that episode of Community where he leaves and everybody's having fun, and then he comes back with pizzas and everything is on fire and he's just looking around like, what the hell is going on? That's Triple H coming back to NXT. But I bring this up because he got his ass kicked. Triple H is not the kind of person to take that lightly. You know, the meme of Michael Jordan, so then I took that personally, is what I'm feeling here. Now that Triple H has a chance to finally punch back, since he got completely knocked out by AEW, he goes for the big guns, like you said, Kevin Owens, the OC, who just debuted and is a marquee headline across wrestling news left, right, and center, is on NXT at the moment.
I need to make one more point, Santi, that I completely slipped my mind. Austin Theory came out at the end of the show with his Money in the Bank briefcase to confront for the NXT World Championship. Now, this is something we have never seen. So they're changing the entire landscape. And again, another big name, someone who is heavily pushed by Vince, but utilizing something from the main roster that is well established to make a big noise, make some big noise on the NXT side of things. And are we trying to see Triple H saying, okay, I got beat once, but now I have all the pots to put everyone in and actually make NXT a relevant big brand and make it that third show that people really expect it to be in this era of Triple H and Shawn Michaels and new creative and kind of stuff we've never seen before. Is this going to be one of those steps where we're like, do I have to really mark off Tuesday now? And I actually have to pay full attention to NXT? Because if I don't, I'm going to miss something that's going to affect the main roster. Is this something we're going to see? Or are we still just going to see, NXT is just going to be that developmental that gets that little surprise every now and again? Just remember, tonight was Halloween Havoc, right? But it's still developmental. So which one are we going to get here, Santi? Are we going to get where it's going to affect the main roster at all times, or it's going to be just these sporadic surprises?
I mean, right now, with just how wild this was, with how many names were appeared on the show, and just the fact that it was conveniently against AEW Dynamite, I'm going to say that this is a one-off right now. Again, just that one-off to stick it to AEW during their major main event, and I guess as a quick reminder that, hey, I'm Triple H, and don't forget that I also now have control over NXT. Now, let's go back to NXT 2007, 2018. By all accounts, every wrestling fan had NXT Black and Gold at the time as the best wrestling promotion on the planet. The best weekly shows, the best pay-per-views. Do we think that the WWE and Triple H, now that he's got Road Dogg and he's got Shawn Michaels and Khan and Stephanie are dealing with the business side of things, do we think that he wants to revive that, turn it into a proper third brand? Because that's where he was going. Really, like NXT's last year as a top promotion really was when it was treated as a third brand in that Survivor Series, right? WWE, if we're talking separately, NXT, WWE put over NXT wildly. NXT won Survivor Series. The only thing they didn't win was the men's elimination match, and it was so close. They almost won that as well. WWE main roster put NXT over. Does Triple H want to take it back to that level of competition and that level of quality? And if he does want to do that, is it because of AEW? That's what I want to know. Or is it still just, that was my baby and I want to make him my baby again?
Listen, you and I both acknowledge the last best Survivor Series was that triple brand Survivor Series where the 6 week build was just insane. Like you had Seth Rollins showing up and like raiding Becky Lynch storming into NXT and just during that whole man I'm the man segment and all that kind of stuff. That was the best last part of NXT, and then obviously we started to get into the pandemic era and 2.0 came around, and it's just like it didn't feel the same. Nothing has felt the same since Black and Gold, right? And like the takeovers are some of the best pay-per-views of the last 10 years. I genuinely believe that. Now, to your second question, is Triple H saying this is my old baby and I need it to be relevant again? Yes, absolutely. NXT is, I believe, going to become that third show where all eyes are on the people and the developmental talent being put over by maybe the main roster talent going down to work with them. I think someone that really needs something like this is Shinsuke Nakamura, and unfortunately Kevin Owens, because what we'll get into later is like saturation in the main roster. These guys need an area to perform. And Nakamura is going to thrive down there. I don't care if it's for 4 weeks. I don't care if it's for a year. It's something I really see going to be beneficial for the likes of Nakamura and, say, Sonya Deville joining her best friend in Toxic Attraction. Now, to your final point, is this something where Triple H is acknowledging, air quotes, AEW? I think maybe tonight it was one of those ones where it was like a premium live event for NXT, being that it was the Halloween Havoc show. So they needed to do something spectacular because of how iconic the name Halloween Havoc is. Did it fall in line with Dynamite on tonight? Yes. Was Dynamite a decent card? Yes. Are we going to see this moving forward because WWE wants to compete in some level with AEW and feels that they are competition? I don't know yet, because Triple H in his interview a couple of months ago did say that he does acknowledge AEW and sees and understands what they're doing. He goes, does he watch it all the time? No. Does he know what's going on in their product? Absolutely. You would be silly to not understand what the competition is doing and how they're portraying their brand. Are we going to see a battle with AEW moving forward because of this hockey issue? Honestly, Santi, I'm for it. Do I think it's ready to be... Listen, AEW got demoted. That's what I'm going to say. AEW got demoted. TBS did not care about AEW because they're getting what, a 4 point, maybe a 400,000, 300,000 views on TV. What was the lowest they had a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, I mean, let's
255,000.
put it at like, like they're doing 800,000.
Yeah.
If we were to even put it to that, hockey is the least viewed North American sport that there is.
Yes.
Monday Night Raw goes against Monday Night Football, the most viewed night of football aside from Sunday Night Football. So that's concerning and alarming if AEW is getting bumped by hockey. Start of the season hockey, because we are dealing with now the NFL. I mean, they don't ever have to deal with the NFL on Wednesday nights, but playoff baseball, the NBA is back. So if this network is already seeing more value in the smallest of the North American major sports over AEW, we might be seeing a lot more Tuesday nights AEW going head to head against NXT, and I'm all for it if it's going to lead to these stacked cards.
Yeah, like honestly, looking at NXT tonight, I was very impressed. Everyone performed and the storytelling was great. Like everything, the nuances, the little segments in the back, like even my favorite part was Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose walking out with Toxic Attraction, leading it as a full force. Like, these two girls have come to dominate the division to another extent. And I'm not going to lie, we've been screaming for Toxic Attraction to get called up to the main roster. You add Sonya Deville as a fourth to that faction. We talked about Damage Control being relevant in one of the most dominant women's factions of all time. Uh, Move Toxic Attraction up and down and make them work both shows, because I see so much value in this whole storyline. Like, these four women could dominate as the next, quote, four horsewomen. I'm not saying they would be the next four horsewomen. I'm saying they could be another entity, which would be fantastic. NXT show tonight was a banger, and I loved it. It was so good. And if we are going to see Dynamite have to compete, it actually might force Tony Khan to shake it up a little bit. And that's the one thing that we've seen with Dynamite. It's kind of been stagnant. It's just been like Moxley going against random people for the title, Jade Cargill cutting her shitty promos and just being Jade Cargill.
Yeah, look, I actually argue that AEW Dynamite's best shows were when it was during the Wednesday Night Wars. So I get what you're saying. This could lead to that shakeup where it causes, to light a fire under Tony Khan's ass to put on. Not that he hasn't been putting on good shows on Wednesday nights, but they aren't as good as they used to be. So could we go back to those earlier Dynamite shows that were just so good week after week? It's possible.
Could this be a thing if we do go to a Tuesday night, like a permanent Tuesday night for Dynamite? Could you see Tony Khan reconsidering his creative responsibilities and looking to bring in people that are more well equipped to help with the stories and building a card? And I know he's brought in some good people, but clearly it's not really doing what Dynamite should be doing and the justice it should. The card, like the overall product is just not where it was. And do you think they've got the talent there? Like 100%. I think we both agree on that. But are we looking at maybe new creative and a new little shakeup, just like WWE's had? We've had a new shakeup, and look, it's thriving on all platforms. Does Tony Khan need to really reconsider this?
I mean, need to is definitely a different conversation than will he. We're talking about somebody who's had 100% say on everything that has happened in AEW television. We as humans are designed to not want to give up control and power. It is just how we are wired. It is how we are designed. It is why a lot of wrestlers, when they join new organizations and they have a negotiation leverage, what is one of the things that they try to negotiate? Creative control. People like to have control over the things that they're able to control. And I find it difficult to live in a world where a man who has had full control over the second biggest wrestling company on the planet is going to want to just give that up in any way, shape, or form. I'm having a tough time conceivably seeing Tony Khan wanting to do this. That being said, maybe he has the mind to realize that it's a good idea, and that's probably why he's a billionaire and I'm not.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm looking at this in all avenues, because it's not just NXT and Triple H acknowledging that there's competition potentially with AEW now. It's now Tony realizing that WWE is a whole new entity now that Vince McMahon has moved away. And they're firing, like I said, on all cylinders across all product and brands. The numbers don't lie for AEW. Ever since a bunch of the CM Punk stuff and losing the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, we have not seen quality across the entire show. You can't rely solely on Moxley and Hangman Page, because they can only do so much, and they are only two players in a very saturated locker room. And I will say that's one thing that AEW has is very saturated. Like, do we even like pay attention to anything that happens on Dark? No. And some good matches are happening on Dark. It's just nobody cares. The Jericho Appreciation Society, I think if Jericho and they start utilizing more people in that than just Chris Jericho and build this as a dominant faction, yeah. But we've seen them miss the ball with quality, like Malachi Black's faction. That was lightning in a bottle if they had allowed it to build to something else.
That Andrade and Chavo stuff that they just never did anything with.
I know, like they just they keep missing the mark with stuff that has value. Like look at Andrade, he's basically begging to get out of there. And if you're gonna keep losing talent, like the people like Alistair or Malachi Black and Andrade, guys that really could be top guys in your company, I think Tony Khan really needs to look at himself in the mirror and be like, have I taken on too much? I'm a business owner of 3 major franchises. I'm trying to be creative enough to build a 2 or 3 episodes a week of a pro wrestling event going up against the biggest brand on the planet that is, you know, Tony Khan's playing checkers, WWE's playing chess right now. And they're doing it at like a grandmaster level. Even with the bad stuff, it's still good. You know?
So let's bring it back to what so to some of the things that we saw on NXT, and maybe the dissecting as to whether or not this is something for long-term booking or if this is something that is just a one-off, again, just to try and steal viewership from AEW. And I think the most interesting one is the Austin Theory stuff. Now, it is not, there is precedent for a major winner of something that allows you a title shot to go between NXT and in the main roster. Charlotte Flair started it when she won the Royal Rumble and went after the NXT Championship at WrestleMania versus Rhea Ripley. So there is precedent. Is this something they're going to do? And 2, are you interested in the Money in the Bank now being a avenue for anyone on the main roster to potentially go after the NXT title, similar to the way that Charlotte Flair set the precedent for winning the Rumble also allows you to go after the NXT title? What do you think?
Yeah, I love all of this because I found ever since that Theory won the Money in the Bank, and I'm just gonna go with Theory for now, and then I'll get to your point of utilizing the Money in the Bank across all brands in a second. But Theory's Money in the Bank run has not been something to rave about.
Really?
It's been a comedic joke in my mind, and it's a disrespect almost to the Money in the Bank contract because you and I speak so highly all the time about that pay-per-view, how it could be the 4th big one, except now that they've gone to War Games for Survivor Series, it kind of brings Survivor Series back a little bit. But Money in the Bank is a relevant pay-per-view, premium live event. I feel they have done the title and the briefcase dirty the way they have been putting it across. I don't like the Theory comedy stuff. Even though I loved the thing in Cardiff with Tyson Fury, I thought that was great, but I just don't think it's been done justice. So making him go to NXT and make the developmental title relevant to potentially come to the main roster, have a Mania spot, and now I move into the pay-per-view itself. We can now see NXT talent in the Money in the Bank ladder match, which I think would make those developmental guys relevant on the main roster and have that up and down move happen more frequently. What gets me excited about Theory coming out tonight is not if he's going to cash in on the NXT title. That is cool. If he wants to do it, awesome. I can't wait for the story. But I'm looking forward to the NXT pay-per-view and who they're going to bring to be a part of the next Money in the Bank title match for the or briefcase match for the men and the women. That's where I get excited for this. What about you? Like this, do you see where I'm coming from with this?
I do. When it comes to the theory stuff in, being able, teasing going into, well, I guess, well, hang on. Let me break this down. I actually really seen a lot of value in Austin Theory's Money in the Bank run, primarily because if you think about it, in the last two major pay-per-views that we have had, with the exception of Extreme Rules, because the champion wasn't there in any way, shape, or form, Theory has been in play in both of those major pay-per-views. That's actually not something that happens very often with Money in the Bank briefcase holders. They seem to not really get themselves involved in it. They try to always make it like, oh, like you're not going to see this coming. But like when you think about it as a smart fan, in theory, no pun intended, you should always expect the Money in the Bank briefcase holder to be an active player at the end of every major pay-per-view. I've always thought that. Like, why wouldn't you be thinking that in the back of your head? I've always thought that the concept of like, it's a shock cash in has never made any sense to me as somebody who's trying to use logic in the world of the silly world of professional wrestling. So I've actually enjoyed the fact that they've acknowledged that is always a possibility, that the briefcase is there and it should be in the back of everyone's mind whenever the champion is defending that belt. And I like that. And I hope they do it again at Saudi Arabia. I hope there's a presence of Austin Theory. And I hope that the Money in the Bank briefcase always has an overlooming presence over the champion. That's what I want to see. And I've enjoyed that they've done that with Theory. I want them to add that to the NXT title as well, because people like Braun Breaker have just felt unstoppable, right? He has just been running through that roster left, right, and center. But if we add that dynamic of him always having to look over his shoulder because Austin Theory's a possibility, that just adds a better dynamic to, or a more, I guess, more layers and more dimensions to the championship reign of somebody like Braun Breaker. So I want to see this continue to develop, but I don't want to see it exclusive to NXT. I want to continue to see Theory appearing on every show, threatening every champion until it's actually cashed in.
Yeah, and that's my point of this. I'm not saying I want to see Theory strictly on NXT. What I'm saying is it brings a whole new dynamic to blending the developmental into the main roster. Almost like when Kevin Owens came up with the title and challenged Cena for the US Championship in the Open Challenge. That was great television. That was when Black and Gold was at its peak and it was entertaining. Now having the Money in the Bank relevant down in NXT, but still having Theory come across and, keep Roman thinking. I'm all for this. I'm just saying I was a fan that the Money in the Bank was always in play. I just don't like how they've done Theory dirty. I'm not a big Theory fan. I just don't like the comedy aspect of the Money in the Bank cash-ins. Every time his music hits, I'm like, he's not winning. And I don't believe the shock factor would be there if he had one, because it would have been a weird booking situation because it didn't feel right? So those two cash-ins at Clash and at Survivor Series or SummerSlam, I just were like, okay, his music's hit, something screwy is gonna happen. That's all I felt for it, and that's where I was going with that. I'm glad it's in play. I want it to be in play. I'd love Logan to do something to get rid of Theory at Saudi Arabia. I think that would be hilarious booking. Survivor Series, the same thing. Something's gonna happen in Survivor Series, but it's just I want it booked better. But I still want him involved in the NXT title because imagine Theory somehow gets involved in a title bout with Roman, has the confidence that he could actually beat him, and just randomly in a week goes and cashes in and becomes a double champ on both brands, you know? If they could book something like that. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it would be interesting to see how they booked it. I just want to see Theory booked better. That's all I'm saying.
So, yeah, I mean, we kind of went on a big tangent there, but
Sorry.
no, I mean, it was both of us. So back to the, I guess, like the main topic here. We're seeing potentially interwoven storylines that attach NXT to the main roster. We're seeing main roster talent go down there and help elevate existing NXT talent. Why is my question. That I think that's the big question. So I want you to give me what you think the answer is. Is it to compete with AEW? Is it to give people who are struggling to get TV time in a now shockingly bloated WWE roster a place to be able to do their craft and get TV time? Or is it because WWE wants to make it a third brand? I gave you 3 options. If you have a surprise fourth, let me know.
I'm actually going to go with all 3 options, and I'm going to give you the answer why. 1, the heavily bloated roster, because we've had so many fantastic large returns. You can't fit everyone in the 3-hour Raw and the 2-hour SmackDown. Secondly, the talent that have gone down, most of them have come from NXT or had some, except for the OC, but
Right.
they've all come from NXT, so they know the product and they're passionate about the brand. This is Triple H's baby. And I think on my third part of my answer is Triple H wants it to be a third brand. It wants to be doing 1 million views or 1.5 million views a week and wants it to be the third big brand in WWE. Is AEW alongside that on Tuesday nights a thing? Yes. Is WWE wanting to make this where it can utilize its entire roster, bring quality to the new kids with some senior people really teaching them along the way? Absolutely. And can we see NXT being a competitive brand against Raw and SmackDown? That's the big one. Can we see potentially in 6 months, if they keep doing this, NXT selling out 10 to 11,000 person arenas, you know, and booking it as a third big event? I'd go to it. If they brought it to the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, I'd go, because we know what the ability of the talent in NXT is. So to answer your question, Santi, it's all 3. It's all 3 across the board. And I really believe we are in for a hell of a roller coaster when we're seeing, you know, big names from the main roster. Hell, might even see Karrion Kross drop down there, or Drew drop down there and have a feud with Braun Breaker for, you know, a week or 2, you know, and just have, you know, a good influx of main roster working with talent to bring that talent up. And I see the opposite going the other way. What about you? You gave me 3 options. What is your answer out of the 3 options that you've provided me?
I think they want to make it a viable third brand. I think the other stuff is consequences of, you know, the reality that they might be dealing with. You know, like the reality that AEW just happens to be on the same night that one night, and they might end up there a few more nights because they're getting outwatched by hockey in the United States somehow. Yeah, because we all know that the Americans are clamoring to watch the Phoenix Coyotes and the Florida Panthers. I'm sure they are. But I do think that it is a desire to make it into a third brand. I think we're seeing all of the right steps to do that by getting rid of the tainted 2.0 imagery and feel of what Vince McMahon did to NXT Black and Gold. I think we're seeing it with, you know, part of me believes that it is the bloated roster, but it doesn't believe that because it didn't bring down anyone that wasn't already having some sort of affiliation with NXT in the past, again with the exception of the Good Brothers. So almost everybody that was down there, from Shotzi to Shinsuke, would have loved to see the honorary Uce on this episode. I think that would have been awesome. Has some ties to NXT, so I think it really is just to try and bring it back to its glory days, where it is a viable third brand. And I think the best way to do that is something Vince McMahon refused to do for a really long time, was to have an acknowledgement of the main roster, or some sort of interwoven story of the main roster and NXT 2.0. Yes, we had main roster guys go down there and become full-time NXT stars like Dolph Ziggler and Apollo. So we have seen that, but it wasn't a collaborative work with the main roster television and NXT. It was, they were down there. Ziggler was in NXT. He wasn't bringing the storylines from NXT to Monday Night Raw. That wasn't happening. I think that that's what could be the big change here, where we can have collaboration, where storylines are developed and paid off week by week, that involve both NXT and the main roster in some way, shape, or form. I think that it is very possible. Let's not forget, NXT itself recently became bloated with talent with the closure of NXT UK. So there is just so much excellent talent to work with there. And if you want to develop the stars of the future, what better way than to dip your toes with their characters on main roster television without doing a full call up? Imagine how awesome a 1 month storyline it would be for Gunther to go down, or for Ilya Dragunov to go up, and just have those two put on a banger of a match, right? Like, these are the things I'm talking about. True collaboration between main roster and NXT that isn't just siloed to NXT television. I want to see it develop and flourish on main roster television. I want to see it develop and flourish on up, down, down, on the WWE YouTube channel, the Bump, anything really that, again, allows us to go outside of the silo that was NXT 2.0, where Vince McMahon refused to allow anything to leave there and come into anything really related to the main roster.
Even to the point of changing their names as they came up. Like, it made no sense when these people were established, and that people get excited to see them come up to the main roster and they've got a completely new name, like Butch coming up. Like, that's the one that really bugs me still. I think Pete Dunne needs his name back, but that's a whole nother episode. I think the one thing I want to add to your comment and to your point is, I think if WWE does do this and makes NXT that third brand that is viable and established, I really think it's going to put the clamp down on AEW, where Tony is going to be forced to do something and not just go week in and week out with no real storylines. And just, you can't, it's not the 60s and the 70s anymore. And unfortunately, just pro wrestling is not going to get you that big bump in what you need in your views and your television. That was then. Sports entertainment was developed because Vince saw the change in the structure of what wrestling could be. And that's what we watch WWE for.
Yeah.
We watch it for the sports entertainment. I love professional wrestling. Don't get me wrong. I'm not shitting on professional wrestling. All I'm saying is I enjoy the story and the entertainment as well, and I'm not getting that from AEW, and something needs to change there to get me more interested. Like you said to me, or like we said to each other a while ago, when Vince was in charge of Raw and SmackDown, there was a time during us running Straight Shoot, we would just watch the highlights of Raw and SmackDown. That's all I do now for Dynamite and Rampage, just to keep up so I can have context to speak on here about it. I don't watch the whole show anymore. And it's sad because I want to. I want to watch that much wrestling in a week, but Tony's not giving us what we need to make it worth my time.
Yeah, what I will say is, if I were Tony Khan, again, not a billionaire, not a booker, so I it's tough for me to really give you a good picture of what Tony Khan would be like. But if I'm looking around, I am seeing that WWE is booking pay-per-views on the same night that they are, that that NXT could be potentially on the same nights as many episodes of Dynamite moving forward. That SmackDown, that the only reason people watch Rampage is because SmackDown is only 2 hours. If SmackDown ever went to 3 hours, Rampage is fucked.
And it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible.
with how big the roster is getting,
Yeah.
and Fox wanting that sweet WWE viewership and revenue, don't think that it's completely out of the question. And WWE stepping on the New Japan turf by grabbing the OC, right? So, like, I have to feel like Tony Khan must be feeling like the walls are closing in, right? And it was a good thing for Tony Khan for a really long time that Vince McMahon did not acknowledge it as competition, because it allowed him to really run guerrilla tactics in warfare and grow and establish in a bubble, in a vacuum away from the WWE. If Triple H actually has his eyes set on trouncing AEW, that's a problem. That is actually a problem for AEW, and it's a problem that could lead to some of the best professional wrestling that we have seen ever.
Just remember, we had this whole situation 25 years ago when Vince acknowledged billionaire Ted as competition, and granted, at that time there was good product on WCW, there was good product on WWE, but then we just got that one big, or those two big flames that were Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and literally just trampled over WCW when they acknowledged them as competition. If Triple H lived through that as a performer, do you think Triple H might not want his moment to say, I took down AEW? You guys said they were competition. I acknowledge them as competition. And like Vince, not saying they're going to buy AEW, but I took out my competition.
Hey, I'll never forget that quote from Triple H. Vince McMahon will buy that pissant company just to fire you again, when he said that to Billy Gunn. I'm just like, obviously, like, that's more pie in the sky, this crazy booking here that we're doing here as part of a podcast. But I think it would be irresponsible of us to not acknowledge the possibility of Triple H wanting to take out AEW as a major professional goal of his, knowing that he's the one that took it in the chin the first time during the pandemic, during the Wednesday Night Wars. And again, that was the pandemic. It was just different. Weirdly enough, Steve, AEW was better prepared for the pandemic than WWE was, because of Tony Khan's accessibility to the facility in Jacksonville. So, and of course, because WWE was a much bigger, more bloated company that needed to get rid of expenditures during the pandemic, what did Tony Khan do? Gobbled them all up, grabbed the likes of oh my goodness, don't tell me. It's just bothering oh my God. Former Bray Wyatt stablemate. Luke Harper. I just couldn't remember his AEW. I knew Luke Harper. Okay. Brody Lee, gobbling people up like the Brody Lees of the world that were being laid off because of the pandemic. Like, that's gone. That is done. WWE is making money hand over fist at the moment. Saudi money's flowing in. Fox money's flowing in. NBC money's flowing in. So it's got one of the biggest YouTube channels in the world. It's making
most
YouTube money.
Profitable quarter in the last 10-15 years, they said.
Yeah.
Like, insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
So, and WWE is showing, and it's putting their money where its mouth is by bringing back a lot of the talent that it let go. And it's using that very same talent to try and take a shot at AEW, and I love it. And I think it's wonderful, and it's just going to lead to a better product across the board. We're already seeing it with WWE. It is honest to God, 50 times better than what it was 5 months ago. It really,
100%.
really is. So is AEW going to have to reply?
Yeah, it's one of those ones. I said to you on our flight back from San Diego, it was like I genuinely like have it chalked off in my calendar every Monday and Friday night now. It's like I'm watching wrestling again. Like, you even said you sat through a few episodes fully of Raw and you just went undistracted because it's one of those ones now you are forced to not miss. And yeah, it's gonna force AEW to do something because I have a feeling that I said this 3 months ago when the whole debacle, or 2 months ago when the whole debacle backstage happened. AEW's in a lot of trouble right now. And you're not seeing changes in AEW week in and week out. It's the same show. It's just wrestling. And yeah, okay, they brought in Saraya, but the best part about Saraya's return so far is the return. And that's it. It's kind of like she's fallen into that abyss that is the AEW 2-hour event, So it's just I'm very concerned for AEW. I'm genuinely concerned for AEW, and Tony really needs to do something to step it up, or WWE's just gonna squash them like an ant, move forward like they never existed, and then you're gonna see a lot of miserable wrestlers over at AEW wanting out of these big contracts.
All right, we'll leave it there. Steve, where can people find you?
Guys, I'm back on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mr. Tesh. I'm streaming 4 nights a week, Wednesday through Sunday, somewhere around there. Twitter, Mr. Tesh on Twitter. I want to plug my Twitter since Santi's way ahead of me on followers on Twitter. Guys, follow me on Twitter so Santi's not kicking my ass. And then obviously on TikTok on Straight Shoot and my TikTok page, Mr. Tesh. Santi, what about you?
All my links are down there as well. The one I'd like to encourage you to come over to is twitch.tv/SantiZap. I am streaming there 5 nights a week with the exceptions of Tuesdays, because we're recording on Tuesdays, with the exception of Tuesdays and Sundays. So every other day of the week, come on over from 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard to 1:30 a.m. in the morning. So that's where we'll leave it at. Thank you very much for watching/listening to this episode of Straight Shooter Wrestling Podcast. If you watch it on YouTube, please consider leaving this a like. If you have any questions, please leave us a comment. We're always looking for those. And if you're listening to this on audio services like Spotify or Apple Music, make sure to leave it Apple Podcasts, I should say. Make sure to leave it 5 stars or whatever method of review that there is there. Anything really helps. We would really appreciate that. Thank you very much for listening and watching. Take care. Be good people. Cheers.